Just talk about that.
My name is Brent Chittenden. I am a podcaster with a podcast called True North Nerds. Feel free to look us up. We just launched a website, so truenorthnerds.com. You can go there. It will link you to everything else. But right now, we are waiting on two other people, but we have... Now, I'm going to pronounce your last name wrong.
Oh, watch this.
Anthony Ruttgaizer?
Yes!
Oh, sweet! Because it looks like it should be pronounced like that, but it also looks like, no, three of these letters may be silent.
Silent? No.
So, Anthony is a writer who's been kicking around this scene for quite a while now.
Not that long.
5-6
years?
Yeah, that's...
What's this year? This is 2019, so about 5 years.
In independent comics, that's a lifetime, dude.
Well, luckily I have a day job, so... Most people in comics have a day job. Yeah.
So I like these type of panels to be interactive, especially if you're wanting to. Oh, are you the other people I'm waiting for? Yes. Sweet. We were just about to start selling the timeshares.
Welcome aboard.
Sorry about that. Took a wrong turn to Albuquerque.
No. I will forgive you for that reference alone. So if you two gentlemen would be kind enough to introduce yourself to the crowd, because I don't think I've met either one of you before.
All right. My name is Jack Briglio. Been a writer for, 30 years if you go right back to my first book that I did. If anybody remembers Aircell Comics here, and nobody does, it looks like. Okay, so
I do.
There we go.
I'm in that age bracket.
There it is. I did a couple issues of Dragon Force after a certain Dale Keown moved on to Incredible Hulk for Marvel. So that was my first big break into comics, and then I followed that up with an all-ages fantasy series called Growing Up Enchanted, which was nominated for an Eisner in 2003, which led me to do some work for DC Comics. I did some Legion of Superheroes in the 31st Century and Scooby-Doo for them for about a couple of years. Today, I'm you guys may be familiar with True Patriot Comics through Chapter House. I write a character for that series called Dominion Jack. True Patriot Presents is on Comixology right now as a digital only series, and I do a number of other creator-owned books. I've done a couple of things for one for Aces Weekly for crime fantasy called Take Two, and a new anthology I'm doing for Marcosia called Flip, which is an alternate realities real world what ifs. That's why it's called Flip. That just looks at different real world situations and gives it a different look. And this is, what if this were to happen or that were to happen? So that's kind of where I am today.
Now that we're more formal, Anthony, do you want to tell everybody what you're been up to?
I had a bad joke, but I'm not going to make it. My name is Anthony Ruttgaizer. I've been writing for 5 or 6 years, and I started with a series called The First Hero, which was published by, the first 2 volumes were published by Action Lab. Everybody who gets superpowers goes insane, becomes a danger to society. So the government hunts you down until our main character finds out he has powers, doesn't lose his mind, has to decide what he's going to do next. In there, we also did a crossover called Actionverse, where we brought together The First Hero, Jamal Eigel's Molly Danger, Midnight Tiger by Ray Anthony Height. What else was in there? Crap. Oh, this is embarrassing. Yeah. It was Fracture by Chad Saccone, and what's the last one? Vito's. Oh, yeah, Vito's book, Stray. Vito Del Sante. Yeah. Thank you. Vito's going to kill me if he finds that. Don't put this on the internet. Yeah. And we did a 6-issue crossover series where we brought all these books together and created one superhero universe for Action Lab. Since then, after that, I put out a book about a year or so ago called Heroes of Homeroom C. Twin 12-year-old superheroes lose their powers and their parents send them back to public school. Always have your elevator pitch, kids. And I'm working on some. In the last year or so, I now have a literary agent. I'm shopping a longer version of Homeroom C. And I'm shopping a father-son drama in the world of professional wrestling, because that's what I do when I'm not writing comics. I'm also part-time a professional wrestler for 30 years, and I'm working on another book with Lee Moder, who you may know from. Lee's been in the business about 25, 27 years. He's drawn Wonder Woman, Legion of Superheroes, Shinku at Image, Painkiller Jane, a bunch of stuff. And he and I have been friends since the first night I went to San Diego in 1993. And we're finally working on something together that will hopefully, if I keep cracking the whip, hopefully be ready for Fan Expo.
Nice.
And, yeah.
I'm Ian Flynn. I've been writing for 12 years professionally. If you know me at all, you know me from Sonic the Hedgehog. First at Archie Comics for 10 years and now with IDW. Also have written for Mega Man, Ninja Turtles, a tiny Superman story, so I can technically say I wrote Superman. Some localization on some video game stuff, and for some of the Dark Horse trades, the Mario Encyclopedia, the Breath of the Wild art book, and some other stuff, along with a adaptation of the ARMS video game series that should be out this year, hopefully, question mark? We'll see.
So I like these panels to be interactive because it's a great chance if you are a would-be writer or just like to know how the sausage gets made, so to speak. This is your time to ask questions. So if you've got one about writing or the comics industry in a whole, especially like the independent side of things, just raise up your hand and I'll make sure to get to you. So I guess we'll start with the easiest / hardest question to answer. What drove you into writing comics in the first place? This could take all day, or it could take 5 minutes.
I'll start off by saying I can't draw. So if I want to tell my stories, I have to be able to do it with someone who can draw. So if I'm going to be worth my salt, I better be a good writer.
Anthony?
For me, it was Wolverine #1 is the first comic book I ever bought with my own money off a newsstand when I was, I think, 11, and it was fantastic. That's when I started collecting comics, and it became voracious immediately, and I wanted to do it myself. I wanted to create comics, and my art isn't up to snuff yet. Though I've been told, listen, just draw yourself so that we don't have to deal with anybody in an extra contract. But yeah, I took to the idea of creating characters and telling stories, and went to San Diego a few times in the 90s thinking that, I'd get a job as a writer by osmosis. I'll just stand here and people will swirl around me, and eventually somebody will give me an assignment. That's not how it works. And walked away from it for a long time, and about 7-8 years ago, I could feel my brain atrophy at my day job, and said, I need to do something. And I picked up and started writing again, and that first thought turned into the first hero, and I was able to find an artist, and then find another artist, and then find another artist, which is a little stupid story, and find a company that believed in it enough to publish it. So now I'm pursuing that. That's That's my goal now, is graphic novels and book publishing, and basically working for myself and being creative. In the end, all you are is a collection of your ideas. Long after you're gone, people remember what you had to say. And the more people, the better. So say something cool.
I've been reading comics since I was 5, I think. The Richie Rich, Archie days, Harvey comics days, all that stuff. I've always wanted to write, but always wanted to write comics. Even when, at the time, the way to find out how to get into the industry was a lot tougher. There was no internet for me, easily accessible as it is today, to find out how do I go about doing this. So I kind of made it up as I went along, and actually took some script writing courses at the local college to get at least the craft down, even though I knew, years and years of reading comics, knew the format enough. I wanted to learn through screenwriting to kind of help that along, and that's what propelled me after that initial taste I got in the late '80s with Aircell, with Dragon Force. So. And it was always one of those things, because I know lots of people always talk to me about, why don't you do novels or short stories or all that stuff? And I'm going, hey, not to discount anything else, not to discount film, not to discount TV or discount prose. Comics was always what I was comfortable in, and either way, consuming and wanting to give back, I guess. And that's what I've been trying to do for years, is trying to give back what the joy I've been given over the years reading the books that I love.
Now, you guys all come from very different comic backgrounds. Is from the independent side of things to you're working with a character that is kind of corporate upon corporate, like it's a licensed character. So I was wondering if you three would sort of describe what your writing method is, because I'm imagining it might be a little bit different for all of you, if you're a full script kind of person, or if you're the quote unquote Marvel method, or if it's a little bit of both. Like, kind of take through the steps of what you do to get to your story.
Marvel method, I don't do a lot of. If I'm going to do Marvel method, it'll be with an artist that I trust and I'm close to. I think probably one of the artists that I broke into the business with. It's probably the one guy that I'd write that way for. And just to explain, Marvel method is plot, loosely a loose plot outline telling what you want to happen on each page, but not getting that detailed panel by panel dialogue with specific dialogue and that sort of thing. I usually do full script for everything, whether it's work for hire or my own creator-owned books. You can be maybe a little lazier on the creator-owned side for sure. Because
more relaxed, not lazy,
relaxed, very relaxed. Not worrying that you'll get dinged on things if it's not going to an editor or for a licensed character. Because I've done licensed characters over the years, and yeah, I've worked with some great editors, but some of the things coming back that the editors would get back from the official the approvals made things always very challenging. I'm sure, Ian, you've got tons of stories there, so I'll leave that for you. A lot more stories than I do, but. On the creator-owned side, you can be a lot more relaxed in terms of writing your script. And what I usually tell people when they're writing comics is to remember that what you're and I did this with this Flip anthology, because I was the editor on that book, and I brought some people in who had never done comics before, and I explained to them that the script is your I don't want to call it a contract, but it's your thing that it's your talking points to your artist. And if there's an editor to an editor who then looks at it, you don't have to worry. Like I see how especially prose writers really get into some of the details that they get into the story, and they might not be obvious to the reader in terms of what's going on, because they're setting up some sort of mystery, let's say, right? I don't want to say it here and on page 1, panel 7, because that'll play out in page 20. It's like, well, no, this is the script. You're talking to an artist. Artist needs to know that, so that the artist can draw this properly for you, so that nuance that you want will really you'll really bring it home. So there is a certain understanding that you need when you're writing a script, a full script, that you are talking to your artist and you're trying to explain to the artist what you're writing about, so that the both of you can turn out the best thing possible, right? And make it that much better as a collaboration between the two of you. So that's kind of how I distinguish between the two. But one of the things I always bring up when it comes to writing the full scripts.
Okay, Anthony, what's your work process kind of like?
Well, I write full scripts. I'm verbose, but I start with a thing that Ty Templeton taught me, and I'll see if I can. I do a story map where, I have a layout of pages, and I'll zoom in on one, so that there's a 14-year-old kid in the front row, and right in the middle it says strip club. So where I take a page and I'll break it down into panels, and it's just a couple of words, 3-4 words for each panel. And then from that I will go, I'll sit down, type that out as quickly as possible, and then go back and start filling in panel descriptions, and go back and start filling in dialogue.
Wondering what program you use.
Oh, that's Metabang. Easy on my old eyes. I write very full scripts for the most part, and churn out 50,000 words for one story, because I want to describe. If I have a room, and there's things that need to be in that room, I need to tell my artist everything that needs to be in that room, and at some point, sometimes where, sometimes why. And like you were saying, I'm not, I'm working with my artists. So if I need something to be in a panel but not quite clear because the big reveal is when you turn the page, I have to describe that. So I want to give my artist all the tools to not only understand the story and be able to translate that story into art, but I want them to understand why we're doing what we're doing. Sometimes I'll include a doodle if I'm having trouble for myself, or I think it would be quicker if I just draw a little doodle and say this, and this. This is what it should basically look like. Here's your stick figures. Then I'll do that. I'll make reference to a movie or TV show or something that will help clue them into what I'm doing quicker. Whatever helps. But yeah, I full scripts. I've not tried the Marvel method. I don't think I would want to. Just
I don't know
because
if many people at Marvel even use it anymore, but that's the one that always gets brought up, especially at these things. I find it's still in the public consciousness.
Yeah, because I'd like to know what's going on. Like, I mean, when I give out a full script, I get stuff back, and then I do a dialogue pass before I send it to my letterer, because sometimes I have written too much dialogue and it can be pared down. The economy of words, and especially when you're dealing with panels full of art, and the last thing you want to do is cut off or block out something that is really gorgeous just so you can have your character say 6 extra words that don't mean crap. I'll do a dialogue pass and pare things down. So like the writing process doesn't stop when I finish the script and hand it off. It's going to continue. But yeah, so the shortest I've ever written a 22-page script is 4 days. The longest is, I think I'm still rewriting one. It's been like 8 years or something. And that 22-page script is now 60. I was like, yeah, I'm missing out on this. Okay, go back. But yeah, it starts as a visual story map because it helps me see, like for a 22-page comic, I can put 22 panels onto one page. I can see the entire comic book at once. It helps me move things around if I need. It helps me figure out how much space a sequence needs. It helps me know, what's the left side, what's the right side. If I want that little cliffhanger for you to turn the page, I know, helps with pacing. So starts with that, and then it goes to a whole lot of words, just like this answer.
Ian.
My process has become so rote at this point, I don't know if I could ever break the mold. Before I even get to script, I have to submit a springboard, which is a 1 to 2 paragraph synopsis of what the story will be about. Because with all these licensed books, they have to not only meet editorial approval. I mean, they look to see if it is a adequately told story. Does it have a good hook? Does it have a solid plot line throughout? Does it actually do something? But it also has to meet the licensor's criteria, and there may be elements within the story that they don't like today. Tomorrow they may be fine with it. You never know. So once the springboard is approved, then usually, depends on the deadline or the publisher, I'll usually do a breakdown, which is a 1 to 2 sentence description of each page's action. It's basically a pure text version of what you were doing. And that way, if there needs to be reorganization of plot beats or key dialogue, you're just reorganizing the sentences on a page, not revising an entire script, which would make me cry. And then once that has met editorial and licensor approval, then I can go to script, and then I do full script. And exactly like they were saying, this is the skeleton. This is the blueprint that you are giving to the construction team. If you leave something up to chance, if you leave anything for them to guess on or spend extra time researching or trying to figure out, it's just putting more burden on the art team, and it's not going to look like what you've envisioned. So the more you give them to work with, the easier it is for them, and the more likely it's going to result in what you have envisioned. Unless you have no idea how it should play out, and then I usually put in the script, however this works best for you, man. Yeah. And it varies from title to title, publisher to publisher. Sometimes I have direct contact with the art team. Sometimes they'll send me like breakdowns and say, is this what you were thinking? Is this design what you were thinking? And I'm like, yeah, cool, or we exchange notes. Sometimes I send off the script and I don't know what happens until it's published, which is terrifying sometimes. But the team that I'm working on with, especially with Sonic, who I've known for years, we've kind of gotten into a rhythm with one another, and I know I can trust them with anything. With the one original thing that I'm working on, which might be out this year, fingers crossed, it's a lot harder to publish something when you don't have someone handling all the organization and all the funds for you. It's strange. It's basically the same process for me because that's how I've learned how to process my thoughts and put it together so that I have the script in a way that the artist can work easily from on their free time.
And to the point Ian and Anthony were making about the story mapping and the outlining, I wanted to make it obvious that that's an important component of the script. I mean, I know we all talked about the details of getting into the script, but that story mapping exercise, that the outlining, page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, this is what happens on these pages. It's so crucial. If anybody has any difficulty writing scripts and maybe they haven't done an outline, maybe that might be why, right? Because it makes your job that much easier. Not to say that it necessarily marries to what your story mapping exercise is, because when you write the script, it will change. Yeah. It will change, but at least you've got a basis there. You've got your pacing down. You've figured everything out before you get to that point of when you go through the script and the magic happens.
Ian, I'm curious, in your case, how quickly do you actually get to the scripting part on average, because it's got to go through other licenses?
There is no average, because it really is a matter of hurry up and wait. Sometimes it can be just a week or two. Sometimes it's been upwards of 6 months before I submit something and then get the go-ahead to move forward. Usually, though, I work really, really fast and put in a lot of stuff beforehand because I know I'm going to have to wait for it anyway. So I might as well put it all into bake and then let it come out eventually, and then I can work on each thing after that.
What's the most, what you thought was benign thing that you've had them come back to you and say, no, this is not something Sonic would do? How often do you get notes back that say, how dare you, sir, make our beloved video game character sound like a terrorist, or I don't know, whatever?
Number one, he is.
He really is.
He really is. It's horrible. War criminal. I grew up on Sonic.
Yeah.
It was the video game that we played. It was the comic I grew up reading. So I'm a giga nerd when it comes to Sonic. I kind of knew what the boundaries were going in for the most part, but there are some fascinating and surprising things.
So that's why I'm saying, even more so with your own personal history with the character, there's got to be times where you hand something in and they come back and say no to this, and you think to yourself, who do you think you are?
It's funny you say that, because the note I got last week.
Oh, yeah?
There's a trio of thieves called the Babylon Rogues. They're all bird characters. And they're ne'er-do-wells, and one of the heroic characters playfully challenges them, say, if you bring trouble to my yard again, I'm going to pluck you bald. I got a note back on that. Apparently, they don't have feathers.
They're birds.
They're birds. One of them in particular has a mohawk of individual feather plumes, but they don't have feathers. So she now threatens to poach them like eggs, because that's perfectly acceptable for sentient animals to cook one another. But you know what? That's fine. That was the only major note. So
did you challenge the idea that
you learn eventually that there's some stuff that you can't challenge. There's some notes where you go, now wait.
Yeah.
For the story, if we did it this way, would that still work? And usually we'll find a middle ground. But there's some stuff when they have a very distinct note.
Yeah.
It's like,
so you just accepted that these birds don't have feathers?
You got to pick your battles. I could have my one line of dialogue, or I can have the rest of the script.
Okay.
Or it's stuff where we reference an actual game moment and say, that's not how it happened. Yeah. It's like, I can look up the scene on YouTube with the subtitles. Okay. Yeah. It's fine. Everything's fine. It's fine.
Oh, we got a couple questions. You in the front there.
I write stories too. I started when I was younger. I started with poetry and then with some stories. But then my problem is that transitioning between the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, I have a scene where I have to transition from Victorian time to the futuristic era through the time portal, and I was thinking like if I should show that, if I should not show that, and like I get lost in the characters because there's so many that I want to name, and I was just wondering if you can help me with that.
transitioning between scenes. Any tips or tricks? Anybody?
First off, is this the first time we're seeing the transition from Victorian to future era, or has this been pre-established?
Yeah, it's been pre-established.
Okay, so if the reader has already seen this happen, you can probably do what is sometimes called a smash cut and just go from one scene to the other. And if the reader has already been taught that's how things work in your universe, they should be able to follow along.
Oh, because it's my own story.
Mhm.
I haven't put it out there yet. I'm just still figuring out the kinks and
Sure.
so it's just something new that I came up with. Yeah.
Yeah, but I see what Ian's saying. It makes sense. The first time that your character or characters make that jump from one era to the other, make a big deal of it. Like, get intricate about showing the whole process, how it works, how it affects them. And once you've shown that, you won't have to show it in that much detail. You've shown your audience how what the differences are and how it's working. So later, when it happens again, they'll have that in their head. They'll have that they can reference in their own memory. So you won't have to show that entire sequence again. So what he's saying about a smash cut, you'll be able to, from one panel to the next, you'll be able to go from Victorian to the future, and people will be able to take the visual cues of the background scenery and say, okay, well, we've changed eras. They'll have that they'll probably have that in the dialogue of, oh, I'm going back to the future, and they'll be able to see the differences from panel to panel. So
The other thing I like doing with going from transitioning is not only the visual cues, but in dialogue or captions, you finish the thought onto that next scene, so that that last panel on that last scene, and this is going to happen, ellipsis, ... Next page in your new scene in captions, next time, right? So it connects the two, but then visually you're saying, okay, I'm someplace else because now you're giving me a caption to finish that off, and it helps.
I actually do that a lot.
Yeah, that helps. It helps bridge them together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Show the transition in a time portal, like how they jump through, or
The first time, yeah. The first.
imagination.
You see, I would say the first time. I'd say the first time, show the whole thing, right? Show it in excruciating detail, so that people have a sense of. Think about like an episode of Star Trek. The first time you see the transporter work, right? The first time they did it was probably a little longer sequence. Now, you don't always see people transport down to the planet. You understand the idea of the transporter, so you have that trope, that knowledge in your head. So if suddenly Riker is on the planet's surface, you can assume, oh, well, they transported down. He can say, I transported down, and you know what that was. You don't have to watch him walk into the room and see an engineer. Yeah, but that's because you've seen it in full at least once early on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah,
man.
perfect.
Hey, listen. We're friends right now, right? What are you going to come in here and start talking about Stargate for? Let's stay friends. Sorry.
Speaking of which, he had the next question. Is it
Is it a Stargate question?
No, but it's a character question.
Okay. You're welcome.
So, I'm just a writer. I'm not really comics. I do want to get back into comics, but one of my big hiccups is distinct character dialogue and how to make it sound different as opposed to just being one's more fluent. Other little details.
This is something that I've gotten a lot of notes on myself, and I don't think there's a magic bullet to solve it. I'm mixing my metaphors, and I'm a professional writer. It shows you anyone can do it. One of the ways you can do it is your word choice, in that if you are using lots of monosyllabic words, that character will come across as very terse or very direct, or at least blunt. If you do something that's a little more flowery or a little more extended, that might sound a little more natural. Be very careful with your accents, because we had a southern character who was a very southern belle. And whenever she said I, we usually did a H with a lowercase h, which you don't normally do, but that distinguished it was the sound rather than her saying ah all the time. And whenever she said she can't do that, we'd put the I into can't. But if you go too far with alliterating the accents, it becomes unintelligible. Yeah. Especially if you aren't familiar with that accent, or you're very bad at representing it. The person's just reading gobbledygook, and you lose that effect. So also you have to be careful, because sometimes what would sound phonetically like the accent doesn't translate onto the page. Classic example, there was a French accented character who said something was over there, except when you read it, it says there's something Zaire. And you really have to be mindful of that.
Going too far is the thing that I'm always trying to avoid. Like I want dialogue to read like somebody is actually saying it. Okay. And so the story I'm working on with Motor right now is set in Pittsburgh in the 70s. 70s has very little, but it's set in Pittsburgh. I lived in Pittsburgh for a couple of years. So there are Pittsburgh words that are thrown in here and there, but I don't want to do it every panel. Like I know guys with like just horrific Pittsburgh accents, and it's, you need a universal translator. But every once in a while, like here's a perfect example, and I say this in my everyday life, and I say it with a note of irony that most people don't get because they haven't been to Pittsburgh. There's a Pittsburgh word, yins, Y-I-N-Z, yins, like where are yins going? You, plural. What are yins up to? And I throw that in for the main character here and there. But I don't make it every time because it's distracting. It's not a lot of, there are times where I pass up the opportunity to throw in the accent because it would be a distraction. I think it would detract from the scene, but every once in a while, just to pepper it in is like, oh yeah, this guy's a dumbass from the South Side, But I don't know. I mean, you have a much larger catalog than I do. Does this become a problem for you deciding how to handle it, or?
I'm gonna probably echo what you guys have been saying. Is like don't go too far and somewhere down the middle there for in those cases, because I'm just thinking of some of the True Patriot work we did, where in some cases we're mixing in some francophone words and maybe some Canadianisms in there as well. And it's like, you don't want to make it go too far that you're really hammering somebody over the head with it, or to a point making it totally unintelligible that somebody can't read it. Like it detracts from what your intent was, which was you're trying to give the character you're trying to give the character right within dialogue. And I mean, there's some neat ways you can do things with dialogue. I mean, some of those word examples, I'm also thinking about speed and cadence and that sort of thing, right? If someone talks really quickly, I mean, it could be lettered in a way that shows all the words a little more tightly together to show that, oh, this person's a rambler. And things around like someone using contractions a lot versus not using contractions, right? That kind of gives you an idea around character as well. But I think the most important part of character is in the actions. The actions, visual, the more visual, the better. Those are the ones that I think really play up the aspects of character in comics, anyways.
Another thing, if you have any kind of stage acting or voice experience, one of the things you can do is read the dialogue as the character. Because if the character is a normal person on the street and you can read the dialogue and it sounds natural to you, then it probably is working. If you're reading it and you're going, I would never say that. I know nobody who sounds like that. You know that you've strayed too far. That, I guess, requires you to be able to act a little bit, but it helps you from a different perspective.
You right there. Yep. Not the person behind you. You.
Hi. So, you're all like fairly big now, I guess, but at some point,
I got a day job, man.
So do I. But hey, thank you.
But no.
Good.
Keep going.
okay, but at some point, I'm guessing you started independently and like had to publish stuff on your own. Do you have any tips for like finding an artist or like
Yes.
doing?
Well, let's focus on that part especially,
Okay.
is finding an artist to work with.
When I was getting the first hero together, when I decided to start writing again, I came up with the idea for the first hero. I had the joy of just calling Lee Moder and saying, hey, I got an idea. I'm going to start writing again. You're drawing it. And he said, okay. And then he and Ron Mars got a deal at Image for Shinku. Now I have to find a new artist. So the difference between me trying to become a writer in the 90s, me trying to become a writer in the 2010s was knowing that I had people I could talk to and figure out how to do things. I also had the joy of the internet, which made the number of people who I could ask for part of their wisdom much greater. And I always tell people at shows like this, if you ask somebody a question in a sincere and polite manner, most people will take the time to share their knowledge with you. And so I started with people I knew. Time for name dropping. Mark Asquith, who was at Space Network, who wrote The Prisoner with Dean Motter in the late 80s. Ty Templeton. I've known Ty Templeton for 30 years now. I talked to Motor. I made contact online with like Jimmy Palmiotti and Nathan Edmondson. And it was Nathan Edmondson who said, listen, just make a list of artists and write to them. And maybe you get a bunch of no's, but don't limit who you're going to ask, within reason, right? And and just say, this is the project, this is who I'm working with, this is who I'm, the publisher, and this is what it is, and maybe you find somebody who's interested, and that's what I did. The other thing that I did, which turned out strangely enough turned out to be the most successful for me, was I went through DeviantArt.com. I limited, oh God, it was painful, but it worked out. I limited it. You can filter down your search to, sequential pages of comic book art. And the two things I learned were there's a lot of people out there who are drawing and for themselves and are really good and hoping to break in. And two, I learned that there's a lot of people out there who think that a single panel image of a My Little Pony committing a horrifying sex act is a sequential page of art. You can't filter them out. You gotta just keep scrolling. But I found, I made a deal. I met Valentine Delandro, in person and talked to him at one of the Toronto ComiCon shows and talked to him about the book, and he was like, yeah. And we worked together on the preview pages that got me the deal at Action Lab. He had to drop off the book, and I had to go back to the well and look for another artist. And that's when I started going through DeviantArt, and I found Philip Seavey. And the first Hero Volume 1 is Philip Seavey's first published work. And after that, he went on to do Tomb Raider and what else was he doing? He was doing some stuff for Top Cow, and a Witch. I think he did some Witchblade, but there are places like DeviantArt where you'll find artists. There's digitalwebbing.com has a forum where you can actually post want ads, or you can see samples of people's work and contact them. And then, I mean, friends. If you have friends who are working in comics or associated with comics, they're going to know people. So, don't be afraid to say, hey, if you know anybody who, tell them to get in contact with me and let's see a sample and maybe we can talk about it. So there's plenty of different ways, but know up front to be transparent with what your, assess what you have to offer an artist and be transparent with what they will get out of the deal. Because without an artist, you've got a pretty book. You've got prose. So you're going to need to offer them something in return for their work. If you're putting together a pitch, a proposal to shop a book around to publishers, you need 6 to 10 pages of art, of finished art. You probably going to have to shell out for that. It's probably going to come out of your pocket. Maybe the same thing if you're planning to self-publish and use Kickstarter. You're going to need to put together some pages that you can put on your page, on your campaign page, so that you can show potential backers what it is you're doing. Have you ever gone through Kickstarter and seen, I've got this great idea and I want to be the next Stan Lee, and there's not a lick of art, and you think to yourself, that's why after 59 days you've got 0. Show people, especially for publishers, your market at that point, your audience at that point is one person. It's an editor. You have to sell your book to an editor. Give them as close to what a finished product would be as possible. You're spoon feeding it to them. That means finished art. So, piggy bank is taking a hammer to the face, and you're going to shell out for your art. But yeah, there are people out there who want to break in. For every writer who doesn't think their art is up to snuff, there's an artist who couldn't put 2 words together if they tried. Boom, find each other. You can find each other, and thank God for the internet. The internet makes all this so much. The internet isn't all a horror show. It's a helpful tool. Thank you, Al Gore. So. Couple of people old enough to get that joke. Anyways.
Yeah, I mean, from what Anthony told you, if you have a friend that's an artist that is in the same sort of situation, that's kind of like the ideal, right? Yeah. I mean, it's how before the internet I started in comics. I met somebody at a comic store who was an artist who had the same dreams and aspirations I did, and we both went for it and got ourselves down the path. So I would say that is the ideal situation. What Anthony said is totally true. All the in terms of trying to find artists and all the expectations. Artist Alley, there's a ton of folks out there that varying degrees of experience. So, but yeah, friendship with somebody like-minded in the similar situation is great, because then you help each other break in. And as a writer, it's sometimes hard breaking in as a writer without any, friends that are writers or artists. So that's why having an artist to go down that path helps you, would help a great deal, because then that friend knows you're bouncing ideas off of each other, and you're truly going to get your best work out of each other if you can find that person that you want to collaborate with.
What's a reasonable rate per page?
That's well now. That is absolutely gonna vary wildly from person to person, man.
Company to company as well, right?
Yeah. Like, you can Google that kind of thing and you'll find the occasional little meme chart gimmick that somebody's put together.
I'd say at the absolute minimum, absolute bare minimum, out of respect of these people who are bringing your vision to life, expect $60 per inked page. Minimum. That's not letters, that's not colors, because those two are disciplines into themselves. Letters especially.
Yeah.
I did not realize how much they are unsung heroes of this entire medium. You are paying for a service, and as long as you're getting your money's worth out of it, you need to pay them for time done.
Yeah. I work with a guy named Fred Stressing. Fred has done everything I've worked on. He's my colorist / letterer. And I was incredibly fortunate to find Fred when I did. And he's already been told, listen, you're stuck with me now, pal. And he's adaptable. Each project, each volume of my comic has taken on a slightly different look based on the artist. And yeah, I'm happy. I'm always happy. Well, happy, but I'm never resentful when that PayPal notification comes through. You have sent money to Fred C. Stressing, because I know the difference between having somebody really, really talented working on my stuff and me trying to figure it out myself. There's a reason that you go to a restaurant every once in a while. You want somebody who's going to cook a meal and not botch it.
So unfortunately, that's the end of this panel. But before we leave, can you guys just let everybody know where they can find you, what your table number is?
All right. I'm at table P34 in Artist Alley. I restocked on the first hero, so I got the first hero, and I got Heroes of Homeroom C, and a bunch of T-shirts, and a very saucy Donald Trump comic strip that I printed some prints of.
I'm in P7B. I'll also in Artist Alley, and I'll have copies of Flip. I'll have copies of True Patriot and Growing Up Enchanted, as well as some information around Take Two, my digital series there through Aces Weekly.
I'm over at PO2A, right next to the overpriced hot dogs. We're at the very beginning of the Artist Alley.
Favorite kind.
Exactly. I've got a bunch of Sonic stuff, although it's been a very good Friday, so I don't have a ton of stuff anymore. Along with some of the Dark Horse stuff I worked on, the Mario Encyclopedia, the Breath of the Wild art book, the collector's edition of the Breath of the Wild art book. So come on down, say hi.
And if you guys wouldn't mind giving a round of applause for our panelists today.
Thank you for coming out.
Thank you very much for coming. You will probably see me here throughout the rest of the weekend. Enjoy the rest of the show.